Welcome back to another episode of the Midlife Mavericks podcast. Today, I'm joined by Mike Dyson, founder of the Good Blokes Co and a powerful voice in the conversation around modern masculinity. Together, we explore the rising epidemic of disconnection among men and the emotional barriers that hold many of us back from building real, meaningful relationships. We dive deep into the struggles men face with vulnerability, emotional expression, and isolation, and why these aren't signs of weakness, but signs for deeper growth. Mike shares practical tools, honest insights, and powerful reflections from his work helping men reconnect with themselves, each other, and their purpose. If you're a man navigating midlife or someone who cares about his relationships, this conversation is a must listen. It's not just about mental health. It's about meaning, legacy, and the courage to live a more connected life. Mike Dyson, welcome to the Midlife Mavericks podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to a chat.
Mate, I can't wait, especially to dive into the topic we're going to be talking about today. I think it's very relevant to men of all ages, not just men in midlife. And I think it's going to be a great conversation. But before we do, a couple of questions I always like to start the podcast with. The first one is, if you and I were going to be boarding an airplane, where would that airplane be going? Do you have a favorite holiday destination, or is there a bucket list item that you want to tick off?
Yeah, I'm going to go straight to the bucket list. A lot of my holidays in recent years have been around Australia. There's a lot to explore in the southwest of WA and some beautiful spots in the north. I have not done a lot of overseas travel at all. So if you're handing me a plane ticket, I've never been to Scandinavia before. I would love to explore, Denmark, Finland, Norway, these beautiful places. And I've also never been to Japan. Would love to get to Japan. There's so many reasons, like Mount Fuji, ski. I've never been skiing before, but also the cultural stuff in Japan, the natural beauty, so many things to do. Those are my first couple of places that come to mind, I reckon.
Yeah, beautiful, mate. I've been to a couple of those places, and Japan is high on my hit list. The snow there, the mountains there are incredible. The people are incredible. The food's amazing. So I can definitely relate to getting back to Japan.
Yeah.
I'll come with you on that one.
Agreed.
Off the back of that, if you and I, were to sit next to each other and were to spark up a conversation, and I was to ask you or to inquire about, what you do and maybe what your mission is, how would you answer that?
Yeah, it's a big question. The heart of my mission is about building human beings' social and emotional capacity. So we talk about emotional intelligence a lot. I don't think we're talking enough about social intelligence, about the level of connection we have in our lives. Where most of us are aware now we're in the midst of an epidemic of social isolation, and that's not just affecting lonely people. It's actually affecting all of us. I think it's affecting our civil dialogue. It's affecting workplaces. It's affecting our productivity as much as it is our well-being. So my mission really is always about building our capacity for difficult conversations, the kind of conversations that bring us together, and for looking after ourselves and looking after our relationships. So social and emotional capacity is what I call it, helping to boost leaders, human beings, blokes, capacity to look after ourselves and to look after our mates.
Beautiful, mate. I love it. There's so much to unpack there. I'm looking forward to it. Before we dive into that, I'm just curious, how did you get here? What's the story behind Mike and how Mike got to this mission?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've always had a passion for mental health stuff. I had a lot of mental health problems in high school. Spent a long time in retail, just bumbling around, not sure what to do with my life. And then in my early 20s, I went back to uni to study traditional Chinese medicine, became a complementary medicine practitioner, worked in that field for 15 years, helping people with, anxiety, depression, insomnia, stress-related illness, these types of things, and coaching people to make better decisions around diet and lifestyle and all of these kinds of things. And about 10 years into my practice, I just noticed that this human connection thing was a real missing piece. Started to work with groups of people and with groups of men specifically around wellbeing stuff. And what I noticed that when you get blokes talking about their wellbeing, you unlock this ability to actually start to support each other and to hold each other to account. I've done a lot of work in masculinity, and we always talk about how men need to be more vulnerable and more open and ask for help. And those things are true, right? But I think the biggest thing we're missing is accountability, that the level of mateship where we have friends who'll go, hey, mate, you look like you're struggling. What are you doing? Or, hey, mate, you said you were going to do this thing. You said you were going to get to the gym 5 times last week. How did you go with it? Like genuine, kind, caring, loving accountability. So after being in complementary medicine for 15 years, I just started to grow this group work stuff on the side and working in schools and working in corporate places, working on camps and retreats. And, that kind of work just built and built and built. And I just love it. And I feel like I can have a real impact in bringing people together to explore their connection and their relationships and their supportiveness and their accountability. So that's what made the shift towards supporting individuals with wellbeing, towards, guiding groups to explore this stuff together. That felt like a bit of a rambling answer, but I do.
No, mate, it's great. It's great. And it's very powerful. And I believe I'm following a little bit in your footsteps, maybe not through the Chinese medicine, but, working as a personal trainer and then working in health coaching. And I think we often see the big pillars of health as nutrition, as training, as stress management and sleep. And connection is often one that's really left off, but it is so powerful. Even like from a coaching perspective, the connection I have with my clients makes a big difference. But the connection that we have with our family, with our friends, with our mates, like with all these sort of things, and being held accountable, it's such a big part of that health journey. And it is something I think, men are crying out for. I think the world's crying out for. So it's great that you're doing that work. I really want to dive into masculinity today and chat a lot more about that. But what I'm just going to put this out there, just out of curiosity, why do you think, your mission is so critical today? What's the big thing, do you think, that's driving this connection, or why do we need more of it?
Yeah, well, I think it's, I hinted at it earlier, talking about an epidemic of social isolation, and you talked about moving into this more group work, and a lot of people that I come across are moving into this group work, and I think people are starting to notice how this crisis is affecting all of us. The stats now suggest that in Australia, we're looking at 16% of Australian men now say they have no close friends. And 30 years ago, that was 3%. That's a stat that we're not talking about so much. We talk about this 15%, 1 in 6 men or whatever is lonely. I'm like, it was only 30 years ago where, 55% of Australians had more than 5 close friends. And now that number is halved. So what makes this work important is that I think we're all suffering from this at the same time. There's been a massive shift in how we connect and how we communicate. And social isolation isn't just about our mental health and well-being. I'm not sure if you read the stats on isolation, but feeling isolated, being in a state of social isolation is as dangerous to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's similar to hypertension and obesity. And I don't think people are thinking about this a lot really openly, but I think a lot of us are walking around, feeling disconnected, feeling isolated, feeling like we don't have the quality and strength of relationships we need to be well, but also to work well, to collaborate in workplaces, I mentioned our civil dialogue earlier. We're just yelling at each other over social media posts. It's like, hang on a sec, why can't we actually make people who disagree with us feel heard? And be okay to sit with that disagreement. Go, all right, you got this plan. I prefer this idea, and we're on a different page, but we can still be civil with each other. So, I think the future of the world is at stake. Stretch. I may sound like something a bit inflammatory there, but I just think the quality of our connection is a solution to so much of the world's struggle. So, yeah, I'm pretty passionate.
Yeah, it's impacting so much, mate. And I think, men are struggling with it more than women. Going into some statistics, and I want to bring some of them up later, but why do you think men struggle more in this area?
I think it's interesting. When you look at the stats, you ask people if they're lonely. In Australia, the most likely person to say they're lonely is an elderly woman. But then you ask people about the quality of their relationships. Do you have people to turn to? Do you have people that you trust? Do you have people that emotionally support you? It's actually young Australian men that struggle the most. And we know that those relationships dwindle as we age, from our 20s to 30s to 40s to 50s. We lose mates, and we're not great at finding new ones and building new friendships. So this next generation, who are currently 18 to 30-year-olds, they are going to be worse off even as that we are as middle-aged guys. Like I'm 40, 48, and I have to really work at it. And so, why do we struggle with it? I think we have been conditioned by the world to prioritize other things, to prioritize working hard, producing, being the provider, being a protector. All of these things are great and important and valuable things. And I want to be one of the providers in my family. I don't want to be the only provider. You can't pay a mortgage off anymore with only one person being the provider. But there's so much more to it. And I reckon if you lined up 100 80-year-old blokes and you say, what was the most important thing in your life? What's been the most important thing in your life? I reckon probably 90% of them will say their family. But if you ask them, what did you spend the most time on? They're not going to say family. They're going to say, I spent a lot of time at work. And so I think we're conditioned to prioritize other things. And I think this human connection thing, it takes vulnerability. It takes me saying, hey, mate, do you want to come and hang out? Or, hey, that was fun. Let's do that again. Or actually, I've got a deep and important thing I want to talk about. It takes real courage to lean into that vulnerability, to start a new mateship, to strengthen an existing mateship, to deepen a mateship, to talk about accountability, to say, hey, mate, you said you were going to do this. How are you going with that thing? And also to rekindle it. Someone moves interstate and you don't see them for 3 years, and it's like we forget they even exist. So, I think, as much as I don't want to shame anyone, I feel like we need to find more courage. I think it's a courage issue. We need to find the bravery to actually understand the importance of human connection and mateship, and have the courage to, say the things, because it's not just us who's missing out. It's usually the bloke on the other end of the phone who's like, oh, thanks for calling,
I can relate totally. Like, I grew up in Victoria, played footy as a kid, had good mates going to school, then went to university. The connections broke a little bit, made new mates at university, then work, Melbourne, then moved to London, opposite side of the world.
Yeah.
Like, you're just transitioning through friends as you go through your life and different phases of your life. And then since moving back to Australia, I've lost connection with the boys I used to play footy with. I've lost connection with the guys I went to uni with. And even just a couple of months back, I posted on social media a post of where have all my mates gone, and just like put it out there to say that, as guys, we just transition through life and we lose these connections. But off the back of that, these boys reached out and it was amazing. And since then I've caught up with them, and it's been great to just rekindle those friendships. It's really been amazing, and it just made me feel so much more connected and realize that those mateships haven't disappeared, but it just took someone to take that action initially to reconnect. And I think as blokes, we're pretty shit at that sometimes, being able to admit that. You talked about the pressures, the provider, working, all these things, all these responsibilities put on us. I want to go into talking about modern masculinity. What do you think of our modern masculinity, or how would you define it?
It's, I think the key with masculinity, it's about authenticity. I think if there's 4 billion men in the world, there needs to be 4 billion different answers to that question. I don't think it's really up to anyone to say this is what masculinity is or should be or could be. Some people talk about masculinities, plural, and I really like that idea. I think there should be, like I said, 4 billion different versions of what it is to be a man. It's a really interesting, changing world out there. The world that I grew up in is not really the world that I'm living in now, and what was expected of men and what is expected of men now is really different. But I don't think it's as simple as saying old school masculinity was this and new school masculinity is that. I think because of the way the world is and communication is and media is, we all get different messages now. So you've got young blokes growing up spending their time on YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat. Is Snapchat even still a thing? I don't even know.
Too many, mate. Can't keep up.
Exactly. They're getting a totally different set of messages to what you and I would have got as young men. And, you and I are getting different messages from, the corporate world and from the, news media and all these kind of things about what it is to be a man. So I think it's become really fractured and diverse. There's these pressures to still be strong, tough, dependable, a breadwinner, a provider, the one who's in charge, the one who makes the decisions. And there's also this pressure to be, to be vulnerable and to change the nappies and to be emotionally intelligent and all. And I think there's really positive elements of all of those different approaches, and there's real difficulties sometimes in that traditional mode of like you have to be tough all the time and not talk about problems and not ask for help. We know that that damages men, but it's not. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's things that men 100 years ago were doing that were beautiful and constructive and caring and thoughtful and product. Let's celebrate the awesomeness of things that men have done. Let's be aware of things that men are getting wrong, and let's find our own version. So I think modern masculinity, healthy we talk about toxic masculinity a lot, but we're not so much talking about healthy masculinity or positive masculinity. For me, that's just about authenticity. It's about finding your own version.
Yeah, I love that. And I think at different points throughout our life, masculinity can mean such a different thing. Like you sort of touched on, younger kids coming up, their teenage years, the early years of your career, midlife, all those sort of things. I think there's different traits or different things different energy that's coming through. And I think masculinity can evolve, and it obviously has. I like that you bring up toxic masculinity though, because I think, there are obviously a wealth of amazing things that we can be doing, and we can have this diversity in masculinity. But what do you feel some of the toxic things are in masculinity?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's an interesting phrase, and the research suggests that when we bring up that phase, people tend to switch off.
Mm.
So it's almost not a effective way of talking about this sort of stuff. But the reason that term exists is because there's people out there who say, hey, some of the time, the way we act as men and when we gather together as men, some of the behavior that comes out is not super healthy. And it's, toxic masculinity is like, toxic food. Doesn't mean all food is toxic. It means there's healthy food and there's toxic food. There's healthy ways of being a man and being, with groups of other men. And there's unhealthy ways that can come out as well. So, I think when we as men are pressuring each other to toughen up, I think that's unhealthy. I think encouraging each other to be resilient in pursuit of our goals, that's a good thing. But that's different from saying, suck it up and get on with it. Look, there's times where we need to suck it up and get on with it, but men are dying. We need to start encouraging men to go out and seek support. And that simplistic method is toxic. It is harming people. It is damaging people. And I think one of the big differences between healthy masculinity and unhealthy expressions of being a man is around strength, because strength is inherently, could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. Strength for me, the courage to be resilient in pursuit of my goals, in service of my family, my people, my community, in service of the world, in service of community. That to me is real strength. Staying true to myself when things get hard. That is the kind of strength I'm aiming for. Whereas encouraging other blokes to be dominant and to push others around and to be better than and to be kind of hyper competitive, that's when things can get really rough. And other people, whether that's men or women or anyone of any gender, can feel the brunt of it. And related to that is like I'm supposed to be in charge and not allowing women to grow and thrive as well. It can be really unhealthy as well. So yeah, I think we need to talk about, are we pressuring other men towards male suicide? Are we encouraging men to behave poorly towards women? Women are dying at the hands of men in Australia. More than one woman a week. It's crazy. And I think we'd be cautious of making men feel like they're blamed for that. And I think we as men can start to take more responsibility. Like if there's a bloke out there whose behavior is really poor towards women, the people who can help that bloke the most are probably men. It's probably other guys. It's the guys who are around the outside who are saying that we care about how women are treated and we care about how men are struggling are treated. Like, are we doing stuff? Are we intervening? Are we stepping up? Are we trying to change that culture? So yeah, long answer to a short but complicated question.
Mate, there's just so much to unpack. It's just like, where masculinity's heading and, the traps that maybe we're falling into. And I think, obviously social media and the pressures that are put on us, and there's so many different things that are feeding this. It can be so hard for us to filter what it is to be a man. Like, what is a healthy man look like? What is healthy masculinity? We've got so many things coming at us, telling us different messages, especially at a young age. And the role models that we have. Like, who are these role models? Who are leading our young men? And I think it's not just men today, but it's like what's been going on in masculinity over the last few decades that have shaped where we are today. And how do we go about changing this? Or how do we start to wake men up to hold each other accountable or to have these conversations? Because it can be a hard topic to bring up. If I know a guy who's not treating women right, like, can I jump in and say something? Like, and what's the best way to approach that? Like, I think maybe a lot of men don't have the tools to figure that out. What are you saying? Or what do you think?
I would agree with you 100% that a lot of men don't have the tools. I think most of us, I've had a lot of conversations with men and with young blokes about this kind of stuff, and everyone seems to want to be part of the solution. Um, our education system is not really empowering us with the social and emotional capacity to have those kind of conversations. Part of the problem is the blokes who are most at risk of harming themselves and harming someone else are lonely, and they don't have someone around that's close enough who can actually notice, who can actually spot it and go, actually, I'm the one here to step in. When there's a bloke making misogynistic jokes in the lunchroom, there's a fair chance he's a lonely guy who's trying to build some sort of connection with a laugh.
Yeah.
So who is the person there that is in the best place to actually step in? And I'm running my Good Blokes Co leadership toolbox at the moment, and this is one of the things we talk about. Like, who is in the best place? It's the person who's most familiar with that guy. Often that person doesn't have someone familiar. Maybe a best step is actually getting to know that person, which might seem really passive, and it might seem like, oh, you're not doing enough to prevent men's violence, but simply to me, like, what's going to be effective? A random stranger coming in and going, mate, that's not okay. It might prevent that problem in the short term, but he's just going to come out and hurt someone else in a different kind of a setting. So, yeah, I think we need to really focus on those certain sets of skills in building connection, building familiarity. I talk about 4 steps in carving out honest conversations, creating the space, leading with honesty, getting really good at listening, and then following it up. And then, frameworks for, good questions to ask when we think someone might be struggling, and ways of actually sharing. This is why this conversation is important. This is why I'm worried about that joke. This is why I'm worried about the impact to that person. So, yeah, we definitely need more skills. It starts in the education system. We're not empowering our young people of any gender with the social and emotional skills to thrive in the modern world. In Australia, we do not prioritize that enough. And then you go into workplaces, and how much time are we really spending on collaboration, teamwork, social well-being? It's like, it's an afterthought. It's like, yellow posters up on the walls for Are You OK Day and rainbow flavored sort of cupcakes on Pride Day. These things are not effective. We need to actually prioritize that so that we actually have the skills to make everyone feel included. And inclusiveness isn't just for LGBT folks and women. Like, we need to include men in inclusiveness as well, which may be a controversial thing to say, but until we get men involved in those conversations, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Mike. And it's a great point that you make about the younger generations of men not learning the social and emotional skills to thrive in this modern world. In March this year, the UK Centre for Social Justice released a report. I think they called it the Lost Boys Report, and it highlighted some of the systemic challenges faced by boys and young men in the UK, but it resonates globally and it resonates here in Australia. Some of their key findings were around education disparities, so boys lagging behind girls at every stage of education and more likely to be expelled. They talked about employment challenges. So since the pandemic, there's been a 40% increase in the number of men not in education, employment, or training. It went on to talk about mental health, and obviously suicide is the lead cause of death in the UK for men under 50. Family structure was one of the other points they covered. And I think they were saying many boys grow up without male role models. And they were talking about the cultural disconnect, so growing ideologies dividing young men and young women. And all of this just leads to further challenges as boys become men, or even as men move through their life and often feel isolated and disconnected. I think a lot of us pretend that we're fine, but the statistics, as you've already mentioned, just don't support this. And I think it's a good thing to maybe recap some of these statistics because a lot of men might be sitting there thinking, okay, I'm fine, or might be trying to ignore the fact that, this is a big problem that we're seeing in our society. So we're talking about shrinking social circles. So 1 in 4 Australian men report having no close friends. 1 in 4 have no one outside of their immediate family that they can rely on. They said that 1 in 10 men over 45 live alone, which is increasing the risk of social isolation. Suicide rates, we talked about the UK, but here in Australia in 2023, there were around 2,500 men died from suicide in Australia, which accounts for 75% of all suicide deaths. Men aged 55 to 59, so men in midlife, had the highest suicide rates at 30 deaths per 100,000. And then we've got the mental health challenges. They say that 43% of Australian males have experienced a mental health problem at some point in their life. And only about 25% of men with mental health issues seek professional help.
Yeah, I think we need to provide the spaces. And when I say we, it's nice to rely on governments and health departments and corporations and community groups. But, I feel like we're never going to get enough if we're waiting for someone else to do it. My big thing is that I think all of us need multiple points of connection. For a lot of men have no emotional support, for example. A lot of other men have emotional support from their partner or from a psychologist, like from one person. And one person that you can talk to about your problems is not enough people. And so if we're trying to create a world where everyone has, 3, 4, 5, 7 people that they can check in with, then maybe all of us need to be creating space for 3, 4, 5, 7 other blokes. Like if every man in Australia was running some sort of men's group or connection group or community-based thing, the problem would be solved. And I'm not saying everyone needs to sit around a fire and have a men's group every week. Those things are amazing, by the way. Everyone should do that. But I'm talking about let's go fishing and checking in on each other. Let's go kick the footy and actually talk about our feelings. Let's go find the best steak in Adelaide and lead some conversations about our hopes, dreams, and ambitions. Let's go for a swim at Bondi Beach every Thursday morning and actually talk about manhood, about fatherhood, about retirement, about all of these kind of things. So I think the answer comes from if you look at men who are struggling so badly that they can't get out of bed, we can't leave it up to them. If we look at men whose behavior is so far out of line that they're damaging people around them, we can't leave it up to them. But there's 90% of men in the middle who, if you ask them, they would say they care about men's well-being. They would say they care about how men are looked after, how women are treated in the world, but we're not doing anything. And I think if we can encourage that army of men who care, men who aren't afraid to say, I give a shit about men's well-being, if we can encourage those men to just catch up with some blokes once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, the ripple effect of that is potentially massive.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. I can definitely see that this is something our society needs, but where are all the men? Where are the men that are going to step into these roles? Where are the men that are going to lead the change that needs to happen? That's the first thing that pops into my head when I see this. And one of the things I've noticed, like now that I'm switching a little bit and trying to work around helping men in midlife, to get them to buy in to like looking after their health or get them to talk about their emotions or get them to open up, like it just seems like such a battle to get them to take that first step because they're so stuck in their ways. I don't feel it's that they don't care about their health or they don't care about, their mates or their family or what's going on, but I just feel that there's that pressure that they're under and they're just feeling like they're holding up the world and they haven't got the strength to hold anymore.
Yeah, to me, it goes back to the word I used earlier, which is priorities. And most of us grow up thinking I'm supposed to prioritize work, mowing the lawn, cleaning the car, and if I've got time, craft beer and finding the best coffee in the local
Too
area.
true.
And, for a lot of us, the spare time is eaten up by just scrolling on my phone and looking at Facebook and just trying to go to bed early. Yeah, by the time you get to my age.
Yeah.
But, if that's where you ask, where are men? And I'm like, well, they're at work or they're in bed or they're scrolling on their phone or they're doing chores around the house or they're driving kids to and from soccer training or whatever it might be. So we're busy. But something needs to shift. We need to start putting our priorities in different spaces. And conversations like this, I think, are where it starts. So when we start talking about who's the solution, I think we need to stop talking about individual men and we need to start talking about groups of men. And I think, if, like you said, where have all my mates gone? And then all of a sudden the blokes just kind of appear. It needs the courageous act for someone to say, you know what? We should be doing more. And whether you're a dad at the local primary school or whether you're a man in a corporate space or whether you're a bunch of blokes who play golf every Sunday, it takes a man in that place to go, you know what? We need to be doing that. And then it takes a group of other blokes to go, you know what? I can't disagree with that. We should be having those discussions and creating more time for each other. So I think we need to do it by collaborating and by coming together. And yes, health departments need to change. Yes, government policies need to change. Education, corporate spheres need to change. Flexible work needs to be a thing for new mums and new dads and people of all ages. But I think we need to start really thinking collaboratively. How can we get on top of this, together?
Yeah, I like it. What happens if we don't change? Like, if we're not willing to step up to the spotlight, step into the arena and do this work, what's the cost, do you feel?
Yeah, well, we're in a crisis of disconnection. We're in a crisis of men's mental health. And, it's clear that we're in a crisis that where women are really unhappy with the way that women and girls are being treated in the world. And if we keep doing what we're doing, that stuff doesn't say the same. That stuff is getting worse because there is a generation of young men behind us who are growing up online, who are growing up, where men are busy and working and doing all the things. And where are they turning to for guidance? Mobile phones, right? And there's other people out there who are happy to make a few grand, selling them some scam idea of what masculinity is all about. So to me, if our generation doesn't step up, it's not that it keeps going along the same, it's that it gets worse. For future generations of young men, they will continue to grow up without, mentors and older blokes showing them what we have learnt by our stage of our life and supporting them to step into more authentic versions of mateship, more authentic versions of caring for ourselves, and more authentic version of what hard work really means, rather than just those norms of just work hard, take the promotion, burn yourself into the ground, and someone will say a nice eulogy about you. So
Yeah.
that sounds doom and gloom, but if the question is what happens, it's not the status quo. The question, if we do nothing, this situation gets worse for us and for for future generations of young men. And sometimes that's what sparks blokes to create change. It's like, I've had a hard life. I'm exhausted. I just want to lie down all the time. Well, if you don't start doing anything about it, your sons and your nephews and your nieces and your daughters are going to feel the brunt of this at a larger scale in future generations.
Yeah, I really like that, Mike, because I think that's a motivation that partly drives me.
Yep.
It's like, I think when we
Right.
just focus in on ourselves and we're so worried about what we're doing as an individual, it can be hard to see, well, why do I need to break out of this? Or I've got no time for this. I can't manage this. But when we think outside of us and we're part of something bigger, we're part of something that affects our mates, we're part of something that may affect the relationship with our parents, our dads, or part of that relationship with our son, that brings a spark. Like, I think, okay, I've got to do something. Like, I can't just sit here and cruise, be stuck in comfort mode or easy street because I'm not willing to step into that challenge or step into that arena. And it's definitely something I feel that will help men go, all right, I need to change, or I need to be part of this journey and switch things up.
And as a man in midlife, Like, what kind of legacy are you leaving behind? If you've got the knowledge that, hang on, this culture isn't working for us and it's caused me a great deal of stress and stress to the people around me, if you're not willing to say, you know what, I want to make the world 1% better for future generations, then I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be really happy with yourself, you know?
No, I think that's right. Legacy is a big thing. It's like, it's not necessarily the material. It's not the material things you're leaving behind. It's not money. It's not all that sort of stuff. Like you say, the old guys that you talk to, and you say, you know, what's the thing that you value the most in your life, and it's been family, but their calendars have all been work and everything else. Well, it's just like, well, where are we spending those times? And it comes back to, like you said, boundaries and priorities. Like being able to really prioritize what's important, what matters most. When you're on your deathbed, what are you going to look back at and think about? And I think sometimes when I talk to men, one of the things I bring up is like, you know, what are the fondest memories of your dad? Like, what are the moments that mattered most? Was it what he bought you? Is it, you know, the holidays, the car, the expensive things, or is it the time he spent with you? Like being present and being there for you. Because I know for one, like the best times with my dad was like spending time in the shed, like working on motorbikes or hanging out. Like,
And on the flip side, what do you wish you had more of from your dad? It's like, at the time, I wish he had bought me a flash pair of Nikes. But now that I look back on it now, I don't give a shit about running shoes or basketball shoes. What I
yeah,
wish I had more of was time, you know, hugs, physical connection, and time on the court. You know.
yeah, 100%. And even now, I just find it sometimes hard to connect with my dad on that deeper level, because I think the masculinity that we grew up with, to work hard, to keep pushing, that's the life he lived.
Yeah.
And I fully love him for everything he did there. But I do feel that there's a connection missing. And I find it hard to break through to him to talk about my emotions or how I feel. And it's quite challenging in that sort of context. And I think a lot of guys feel that, and it might just not be with their dads, but obviously with their mates. So I'd love to maybe just switch gears a little bit and start to talk about, you know, a few of the tools that maybe could help men. So if men are listening into this podcast and they're going, shit, I agree with this. Like this means something to me, but I don't know where to start. Like, what can you recommend?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier 4 steps for a better conversation. And,
Mm.
you know, before you start these 4 steps, I guess it's like, do I have a sense of familiarity there? Am I starting cold? So that's worth thinking as well. Before you start the deepest conversation of your life, like, you know, maybe we can talk about the footy and the quality of local craft beer. I'm going back to that same idea. But the 4 steps for a better conversation are: number 1, carve out the time and space. If you want to lead a conversation, for example, you want to lead a conversation with your dad, I want to get myself in the right headspace, and I want to make sure he's in the right headspace. So am I doing it late in the day where he's ready for bed, or am I doing it my dad's not out of bed early in the morning? So it's like, am I picking the right time of day? Am I picking the right location? Are we going for a long drive or a walk, or having a hit of tennis, or sharing a burger? Rather than just sitting down one-to-one, does he love phone chats? Does he not love phone chats? Like, carving out the time and space is thinking about all those different factors in terms of the location, the mode. Some people like a text message or a voice message. Some people hate that stuff. So how do I get myself in the right headspace? How do I make sure they're in the right headspace? How do I find the right physical, you know, location and mode and time and space to start a conversation? So there's point 1. Carve out the time and space for it. And sometimes that's, hey, Dad, I've got something really important to talk about. Have you got a minute? And he might say, oh, come back to me at 3:00. Or he might say, oh, I got time on Sunday. Let's go out for a coffee, or for, you know, whatever your dad's into. Let's go catch a fish, or let's go for a hike, whatever. So, you know, have you got a minute to sit down for a chat? I've got something important to say is a really good place to start in terms of carving out that time and space. So that's step 1. Step 2 to me is leading with a real sense of honesty. And this, for those of us who have grown up as a man, have been told not to talk about your feelings, this is the hardest part. And whenever I talk to people who will say, oh, I tried your 4 steps and they didn't work, I'm like, how did you go with step 2? They're like, oh, I kind of didn't really do that bit. This is the most important piece. For me, if I would have a chat with my dad about our relationship or about masculinity or about fatherhood, if I'm a new dad and I want to talk to my father about fatherhood, I need to carve out the time and space, and then I need to say, hey, Dad, I've got something really important to chat about, and here's why it's important. I've learned this stuff. I listened to this podcast about masculinity, or I've been reading about this kind of stuff, or I heard some statistics about mental health and well-being, or I'm really worried about this, or I saw this headline in the news and it made me really bloody angry. And I think we need to be having this conversation more. But if you're trying to lead a bloke into a conversation, you need to show a little bit of yourself first. And if you're in some kind of leadership position, if you're a dad who's trying to have a conversation with your son, leading with honesty is kind of humanizing yourself. He probably won't want to talk to you if he thinks you're a ultra mega successful genius guy who's never made a mistake in your life, which boys do tend to assume that about their dads. So leading with honesty means kind of humanizing yourself. Like, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I talk about. You know, you made a mistake here. Here's some mistakes that I made in that area. Or I want to talk to you about alcohol. If you want to have a conversation with a mate, here's the things that sometimes doesn't work for me around alcohol, before we lead to point 3, which is listen with a real genuine sense of curiosity. So carve out the space, lead with real honesty, listen with real genuine sense of curiosity. And this is stuff like getting comfortable with silence. You know, awkward silence is a term because we don't like it, and we fill in the space with rubbish. Part of the honesty thing as well is, let's not share about, you know, our opinions and the facts and our analysis. Let's talk about our actual feelings. I statements is a really powerful here. If you're talking about men and how men are, you're probably not talking with real honesty. If you're talking about me and how my feelings are and my experiences and my challenges are, using an I statement, I sometimes struggle with anger, is much more powerful than, oh, you know, blokes find anger hard sometimes. So the honesty piece is I statements and creating that sort of emotional connection. And then step 3 is listen with a real genuine sense of curiosity. Get okay with silence. Put your phone away. Get him to put his phone away. Turn your phones off. Close the computer. If someone wants to have a chat with you, close your laptop. Turn around, face them and say, yeah, mate, what's going on? It's in this world, it is so easy to be distracted with other stuff, with work, with emails, with deadlines, with phones notifications pinging at you, with social media, with all of the things. So get comfortable with silence, avoid the distractions, carve out time away from that stuff, and then watch the obstacles to listening. Avoid minimizing. Avoid, oh, you'll be okay. Avoid, oh, that's like oversympathize. Oh, that's terrible. That never should have. Try and avoid that kind of stuff. Avoid fixing, solving, rescuing. As men, we are so strongly ingrained that we have to have the answer and to have the solution, to have the fix. Oh, I know what to do here. If you really want a proper conversation with someone, let him come with his own solutions first, or let them come up with their own solutions. Being a good listener is about being okay with silence, turning your phone off, and not solving, not giving solutions, not giving advice, not judging, oh, you should have said this. Did you think about doing this? You know, just take a moment to just zip it and shut up for a minute. And just get good at asking questions. See if you can have a conversation where you're just genuinely asking a question to understand. You know, when we are confronted with an opinion we don't like, we can listen on average for, I think, something like 7 seconds is the stats that I saw. We need to get better at zipping it and really trying to understand where someone is coming from, especially when their political views are different to ours, especially when they have a different solution that we're not sure is going to work. Get better at asking good questions. So that's step 3. Carve out the space, lead with honesty, listen with genuine curiosity. And the final step is encourage them to find their solutions and follow it up. So if we're not trying to solve them and give our advice, the natural thing is like, oh, well, what do you think you should do? What are your options here? And if you're talking about, you know, your young daughter who's 5 years old, sometimes you're going to give them ideas, right? But by the time By the time we're 10 years old, we kind of want to start to think of our own solutions. And we might have to say, mate, that one's not going to work. What other ideas do you have? Or dad, I think that's what got you into the problem in the first place. What other solutions have you got? But encourage them to find really practical solutions and things you can do so that you can then follow it up and hold them to account. Hold them to account with love, with support, with encouragement. Hey, mate, did you apologize to that teacher? Hey, dad, did you have a chat with mum that you said that you were gonna have? And in my experience, that accountability piece is the strongest piece that we were missing. But it's so much easier when a mate of yours has said, oh, I really need to get to the gym more. You know, it's one thing for me to say, hey, mate, you've put on some kilos. You need to get to the gym. It's very different to say, hey, mate, you said you were going to go to the gym. How did you go with it? That's care. That's support. That's mateship. So help them find their solutions and follow it up. If you've got a bloke who's struggling with his mental health and you tell him to go to the psychologist and then never speak to him again, like that's not real support. Check in with him a few days later and say, hey, mate, did you call the psych? Did you call the EAP? Did you get a new financial advisor? Did you find a new physio? Whatever support he needs, check in on him and ask him if he actually got that support.
Yeah, awesome.
Carve out the space, lead with honesty, listen with curiosity, encourage action.
They're fantastic steps, but I'll be honest, when I hear you say them, I just see, okay, men, carve out space. That's a challenge. Number one, all right? And I agree, that's what we need more of. I think men need to create more space. We're so busy in our own minds and what's going on for ourselves, we just don't open that up. You talk about, being honest, vulnerability. Like when we start to talk about vulnerability in men, like that's so challenging. I find it challenging. Opening up about my emotions. We're good at burying our emotions, like honesty and being able to say that, I'm feeling afraid or I'm feeling worried or I'm feeling confused or lost or frustrated. Like we don't like to admit that because we feel it's weakness.
Totally.
Not trying to fix. Like I think as guys, we're always there just trying to jump in with the solution and we're trying to fix things. I think we're very practical, aren't we? We're always just like, this is going to help.
We're trained from very early age to be solutions oriented.
Yeah, exactly that, mate. So
and they're all powerful. A tough one as well. Actually, remembering to follow it up and like, oh, should I call this guy or should I not? Like, there's a challenge at every one of those points. And so on our leadership and impact toolbox, we practice it and we build a community. There's 18 blokes in this current training, and they're just practicing it with each other and trying it on like any skill. If you don't do it, you will forget how to do it really quickly. The only way to do this stuff is by stuffing it up. You won't build confidence with it by not doing it.
Yeah, just like going to the gym. Like if you want to build a bigger muscle, it doesn't come from doing one set. It comes from consistency and it comes from the hard work. You've got to put it in to overcome those challenges and overcome those obstacles. Yeah, they're really, really great steps. What do you feel out of all those steps men struggle with the most? So in the guys that you're leading now, what do you feel is the biggest hurdle that they need to break through or struggle with?
Well, I think, like we just said, they struggle with all four of them. But I think the first one is the key piece. If you can actually make it a priority, carve out the time. And like I said, take a breath, get yourself right. If you take 3 slow breaths right now, if you're listening to this podcast, take 3 slow breaths right now. What do I need in this moment to have a good conversation with a mate? It's not checking my emails. It's not scrolling social media. It's not going back to work. It's not doing chores around the house. That's not what we need. What we need is a moment to take a breath. So I think the biggest challenge is if we can say, hey, you know what? I want to make this a priority. I'm going to take a few breaths and I'm going to ring a mate or text a mate or see when he's got time for a chat. That's the biggest step. And then the rest of them follow. Yes, you're going to stuff up the listening thing. You're going to solve and fix and lecture and whatever. We'll all do that. And yeah, you'll forget to the I statements thing and you'll just go on a bit of a rant about how we need to talk about this stuff. And all of a sudden you find yourself, you wanted to have a deep chat, but you're just lecturing a mate on masculinity. I'm like, hang on a sec. This wasn't what I was supposed to do. But start with the first one. Take a few breaths and carve out time and say, hey, I want us to have a chat. And if you both start after taking a few breaths and turning your phones off, you're 85% of the way there.
Yeah, good advice, sound advice. there's a lot there you talk about in terms of the group, and you're talking about, how men engage these conversations with each other, or, how we can do this in our society and our communities. What about the inner work? Like, do you talk much about like what guys need to be doing? Like just being able to stop and ask those powerful questions about what do I need and what are my values and what are my priorities? Like, how many guys are stopping and doing that? Like, I really don't feel that's a common thing in our society. So, what sort of inner work do you recommend guys should be doing here?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying we're not doing enough of it, and it's another one that I don't think we're socialized towards introspection and reflection and journaling. I don't think that's necessarily what our culture celebrates. I work a lot in schools and talking with parents and teachers about how do we get young men to prioritize their emotional development, and I'm like, well, they don't live in a world where the cool kids are journaling and where the alpha big dogs are meditating and reflecting on their behavior. So I think we do have to buck the trend a little bit. It's another thing we have to make a priority, but you can make massive strides in the personal work without having to develop mountains of time. And time you develop on small practices will come back to you in spades of productivity and the quality of your work and your life and your relationships and your well-being. So to me, the simple place to start there is to carve out a few minutes in the morning to start every day. And a great question to ask yourself to start every day. You could spend 30 seconds on this every day. That is not an amount of time that you can't carve. You can carve out 30 seconds. Take a couple of breaths and ask yourself, how do I want to show up today? What kind of man do I want to be today? What kind of father do I want to be today? What kind of brother, son, uncle, team leader, employee, whatever your footy club captain, hockey club president, whatever roles you're in as a man, how do you want to show up? What values are important? What kind of things do you want people to say about you at the end of that day? And if you start every day by going, who do I want to be today? And you go to bed every night going, how did I go? What did I do well? And don't even go into the deep analysis of what you got wrong. If you got more than 30 seconds, go into that. But if you only got 30 seconds, what did I get right today? And if you just start doing that process, that is a great place to head start. I mean, if you got 10 minutes every morning to journal, who do I want to be? Why is that important? What's going to get in the way? What's going to set me up for success? I mean, there's a million different journaling plans you could go on, but if you spend 5 minutes a day on it, it'll be worth it. If you spend 10 minutes on a day on this, it'll be worth it. So I agree with you. We're not doing enough of that work, and it's not normalized enough for men to be doing that work. And we're not talking to our mates about that inner work that we're doing. Once again, let's rely on each other to support each other to do that. But start small. Grab a journal and a pen, or grab a cushion and sit on it and turn your phone off for a minute and just have a think and reflect on where you're at.
Yeah, I love it, mate. I like the morning routine. I like starting the day with that sort of chance just to slow down and reflect. I think, we're just so go, go, go once the day starts that trying to carve out that space later in the day can be quite challenging. By the time we get home from work, we're tired, we're knackered, all the other things that we've got to do with family or responsibilities. So I think morning is definitely the time to be able to sit and create that space. One thing I'm curious about, and I'm looking forward to this because I'm coming to, your workshop in August, is the transformation that you're seeing. So guys that are signing up for the workshops and stuff you're doing, you're taking them through these steps, they're learning these tools. What sort of transformation are you seeing with these guys?
I think the biggest thing, it alludes to that thing you mentioned earlier, is that lack of skills. The biggest transformation I see is the confidence. And blokes will say, I have much, much more confidence now to talk to a mate whose behavior is out of line at work, to check in on a mate who might be struggling, to talk to my sons about what masculinity is all about. So that's the biggest thing, I think. When we give people this, space, they feel more connected. They just feel like they've got more people and more support in their lives and more accountability. And that feeling is, it's really powerful. So there's that. There's the knowledge of like, hang on a sec, I'm not the only one here. And when you realize you're not the only one who's overworked, overstressed, lacking a sense of purpose, lacking a sense of connection, if you lined up the 100 men on your streets, probably 90 of those guys are feeling that similar kind of sensation. And we know it, but the experience of hearing blokes share their reality and their truth is really, really powerful. But yeah, like I said, I think the biggest thing is, like, I'm not an expert, but I've got the confidence to go out there and get it wrong and to stuff it up and have a crack at this introspection thing and have a crack at this personal work and to have a crack at building better relationships and being a better mate and being a better father and being an upstander when I see, that people aren't being treated well, that women aren't being treated well in my world. The confidence is the biggest thing.
Yeah, awesome. You make a really valid point there too when you just spoke about that. Like, I think there's that outside looking in, and men put up those walls and they look like life is going well. I'm successful. I'm achieving all this sort of stuff going on, and we just don't realize how much men are struggling, or we know we're struggling, but we don't have that open conversation to sort of see that, to be in a room where guys are opening up and sharing their struggles, like in men's circles or men's groups or in, team sports or whatever it is, the opportunity to create that space for men to talk about that. I think that takes a lot of weight off a man's shoulders to be able to hear,
Huge.
like, I'm not the only one, because that's not common in our society either. So that's a powerful thing to take away, and that gives you confidence just as a man to realize that, hey, I'm not a failure, I'm not fucking up. Like, this is just part of life and part of the struggle, and we're in this together. And if more men could open up and talk about that, I think that would be a great shift for so many of us, mate. So it's great work that you're doing. Like, it's I can't wait to be over there and to learn more about what you're doing and to connect with other men who have got an interest in this and want to be in that room together and share all that.
There's a big on that note. There's a big community out there. I call them blokes who give a shit. Blokes who aren't afraid to say, you know what, I care about this stuff. I want mental health to be a thing. I want blokes to be able to be who they are. I want women to feel safe and supported and celebrated. I care about this stuff. There is a growing army of men who are willing to kind of do something about that and are showing up in these sort of spaces and, raising funds for mental health and going on fundraising hikes and, starting podcasts and all of these types of things. And the more you are courageous in talking about this stuff, the more you will find other blokes who agree with you and who actually want to be part of the journey. So yeah, sorry, I just had to stop you on that bit.
No, mate, that's great. There's hope, and that's what we want. There's hope out there that we can change the trajectory of masculinity and where it's heading right now, and to have an impact on men's health and to, the suicide rates, the mental health rates, all the things that are happening out there to men that we need to work on. And it's podcasts like this and, the work that you do that can just flick the switch for somebody. And if that does that, then we've achieved something, mate. So it's awesome.
Totally.
Before we finish up, Mike, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to bring up at this point in the podcast?
No, I think it's a pretty good, comprehensive conversation. I think the big thing for me is that the heart of this issue is the connection piece. I think we can't expect men to solve this by themselves, but for us to feel supported, we've got to actually say what's going on. A lot of people say, oh, no one cares about men's mental health. There's all this funding. But I'm like, why do you think no one cares about men's mental health? Because we're not saying it. We're not saying it out loud. This is what we're struggling with. So yeah, I think if we can really think of that connection piece and start doing it together, you don't need to change the culture in your footy club by yourself, and you're not going to. You don't need to change the culture in your workplace by yourself because it's not going to work. But if you have the courage to, carve out the time and space and be honest with a few people in your life, you will find there's a lot of other blokes who care about this sort of stuff as well. And I just think that's the solution. The redefining this whole masculinity situation we find ourselves in. The answer is redefining what we mean by mateship, strengthening what we mean. But we talk a big game about mateship in Australia, right? But a lot of us don't have the level of support we need. A lot of us don't have the level of accountability we need. That I think is the future.
Yeah, 100%. We have mates to have a beer with, we have mates to drink a coffee with, we have mates to have banter with, but we really don't have that deep connection. And everything you've spoken about today is just like opening that door and opening that opportunity. It's an invite to go deeper, the 5 or 7 connections that you need to be able to, start to have an impact, not only on your own, mental health and well-being, but also on those around you. Mike, if people want to reach out, learn more about what you do, where would you like to direct them?
Yeah, my website's got my facilitation skills training on it, which is mikedyson.com.au, or the Good Blokes Co website has some stuff on there as well about the work we do in schools and with corporate groups as well. So that's goodblokes.co. Yeah, I'm not too hard to find. If you're a workplace that wants to have this conversation, or a school that wants to have this conversation, or if you're a bloke who wants to lead these kind of spaces, send me an email, hit me up. I'm always up for a chat. I'm always up for chat around this kind of stuff. I spent a long time chatting about this stuff because I'm passionate about it. So, but a lot
you can see that, mate. You can see that the energy that you have and the passion that you have is fantastic, and it's just so great to see, a guy like yourself putting it all out there and being able to facilitate such great, podcasts, but also to facilitate, these workshops and events that you're doing to help, men break free and to build that connection that we seem to be missing, to become more connected and move away from disconnections. It's beautiful. And I really appreciate your time today, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. That's a wrap for today's episode of the Midlife Mavericks podcast. If this episode hit home for you, don't just sit on it. Take action. If you're a man in midlife looking to regain your strength, energy, and purpose, check out the Midlife Mavericks membership, a community of high-performing men committed to leveling up their health and lifestyle. No fluff, no excuses, just results. Start by taking the Midlife Assessment Scorecard, a quick tool to help you identify the key areas holding you back and what to do about it. Because if you don't track it, you can't improve it. Head to midlife-mavericks.com.au to take the scorecard and learn more about the Midlife Mavericks membership. If this episode helped you, share it with a friend. Iron sharpens iron. Let's build stronger men together. Until next time, take ownership, take action, and keep pushing forward.